Welcome everyone to the Teaching with ArcGIS Notebook webinar. Today we have let me see my screen. Today we have three presenters, Shannon Kaliski, Product Managers for Analytic and Data Science at Esri. We also have Gregory Brunner, Scientist at Esri and Adjunct Professor at St. Louis University. And myself, Kansrina Kunia, a Solution Engineer for Education at Esri. Together, we're going to present this webinar. But before we start, we would like to ask your participation first on a poll question here. So let's open the poll question. Okay. So let's see the poll question in here. So the poll question says, it's open now. Have you used ArcGIS Notebooks? So give a few seconds here. Awesome, thank you. All right, so let's see the result then. Very good. Okay, this is give us the idea in here. So, as about 68% of you have not yet using ArcGIS Notebook. Thank you for that answer and participations. Right, let's close the poll, and then we're gonna start here with the agenda. So what we're gonna start with this webinar is with Shannon. Shannon will introduce you to the ArcGIS to the notebooks. And then after that, we're going to have Gregory. Gregory will bring his experience of teaching a class using ArcGIS Notebooks. He's teaching the class at the St. Louis University. Then Shannon will be back to describe the patterns and idea of using ArcGIS Notebooks, especially how to adopt it in the classroom and teaching with ArcGIS Notebooks. Then I'm going to come to cover the topic on licensing, access, and resources. And we're going to wrap up the webinar with the QA sessions. A little bit of housekeeping in here. All attendees are in listen-only mode. If you have a question, we encourage you to write your question in the question windows. And this session is recorded, and we will share the link when it's available. Without further ado, let's start with introduction to notebooks, and Shannon Kaliski, please take over.
I'm just waiting to see it pop up so that I can share my screen. There we go. There's a nice boring Esri background, but let's get into something exciting. Okay, thank you everyone. Thanks for joining today. Before I get into ArcGIS Notebooks, I wanted to cover kind of what it's based on, which is Jupyter. And Jupyter is really a common thread in the data science community. There are over 7 million public Jupyter notebooks shared on GitHub today, and that's projected to continue just to skyrocket. There's actually an open source Python notebook that is based on Jupyter that is available where you can see up to the day the number of public notebooks on Jupyter, and you can see their forecast of how that's expected to grow. And the folks that created Jupyter have milestones that they had expected to reach. And so far, it's been exceeding all of the milestones that they've accepted. And the reason it's becoming so popular is because it is this way that you can write code, document it, and run it all in one place. For people who are just getting started, it's really convenient because it's interactive. You're able to not only document it with human readable words, but you can also add rich elements like video, text, GIFs, whatever it is that helps tell that story. And if you're working with ArcGIS products, you can also bring in your web apps, your maps, to really add additional context to that story. And for those of you who may be newer to Python, or maybe even if you are super experienced in Python, if you think all the way back to when you got started, or put yourself in your student's shoes, I remember when I was first learning Python, I was so excited, but I had no clue what I was doing. I finally managed to scrape together a Python script, and then looked at my screen blankly and wondered, how do I get it to go? What do I do now? And that's one of the things that I really love about Jupyter, is because that question of how do I get it to go is not there anymore, because all you do is run that cell, and you'll see this later, so don't worry. And you can see the output. You can see, did that code succeed? Did it fail? Did it work? Did it not? Now, Jupyter is browser-based, so you will run it in Chrome, Firefox. It doesn't support IE fully, so if you're an Internet Explorer user, Jupyter itself, if you try to open it in Internet Explorer, you'll notice some funkiness. And if you've ever wondered what's with the spelling of Jupyter, it is the 3 languages that Jupyter was first designed to work with. Of course, today you can use so many more, but it's Julia, Python, and R. I have no idea where the E comes from, but I guess to make it work with Jupyter. And a fun little tidbit there, if you need some trivia, maybe you're, when all of our social distancing is done, you will go to some trivia night, and you'll be able to say that Jupyter is also based on, well, I guess inspired by Galileo's notebooks when he was studying the planet Jupiter, because it was him documenting and recording his findings so that others could reproduce the science that he was creating. Let me click in here so we can actually advance slides. Now, within ArcGIS, Esri's had Jupyter alongside ArcGIS Pro for several years. You've probably noticed, if you've installed Pro, I would say at least since 2.1, that Jupyter was automatically installed. You may have never used it, but it was there. And the ArcGIS API for Python was developed to make the most of Jupyter's functionality. If you go into the Python API, you'll see that the samples and the guides are presented to you in a Jupyter style format. And if you go to run a sample or try it free, then you'll see that what it's going to do is take you to a sandbox where Jupyter notebooks are available for you to run and execute. And the ArcGIS bridge can also be used with open source Jupyter notebooks. And there's a number of learned lessons that can walk you through how to use R with ArcGIS, because Python and R together are, big pieces of the data science ecosystem. And there's one more piece of Jupyter. The folks at Jupyter who created the notebook experience didn't stop there. They created something called Jupyter Lab, which is what you see in the screenshot, or the GIF, I should say, in the far right corner. Now, Jupyter Lab has a little different look and feel, but you can still use the Python API with that if you have either the want or desire to use Jupyter Labs as well. Okay, but now what about ArcGIS Notebooks, what we all came here for? Well, this really sits at the intersection of ArcGIS and open data science. So with ArcGIS, we have the Python API. We have ArcPy, which is the gateway to the thousands of geoprocessing tools within ArcGIS Pro. We have analytics like geoprocessing, the WebGIS analysis tools. And if you're working with ArcGIS Enterprise and have geoanalytics or raster analytics, you can access those tools directly in the notebook as well. Then there's everything open source. There are thousands of Python libraries and packages out there. It's a really diverse ecosystem, and it's really great because you can find a module or a package for almost anything that you might be looking for. So some really common and essential ones are things like pandas, matplotlib, scipy, scikit-learn is a great one too. But so what can, with notebooks, we can think of, I guess where we see them being used most is for things like data engineering. So you have data frames in there. You can do geo-enrichment, geocoding. You can create and edit layers, and those can be persisted into your WebGIS or just saved in your own private workspace. You can do spatial analysis. I've mentioned already those tools that have there. And remember that Jupyter is browser-based, and so ArcGIS Notebooks is as well. And that means that if you're using notebooks in online or enterprise, you can have ArcPy there without a browser. And for many of you who have students that are Mac users and may not want to run boot camps or parallels, that can be a huge win right there, because now you have the power of that analytical processing, but not the tie to having, a desktop software and the system requirements around that. You can also do a lot of AI, machine learning, and deep learning. And I'll show you an example of this when we look into notebooks as they're in ArcGIS Pro. And of course, you can do automation. The Python API can help you do everything from automate the management of your users, so your students, your staff, to managing your content, to even if you are hosting a ArcGIS hub, for example, orchestrating getting all of that content up. And with COVID-19 response, we've seen a lot of organizations and just people around the world using the Python API to be able to quickly pull and update new data. And they do that through notebooks. They use it through open source Jupyter. They do it really in whatever way works best for them. And that's part of the power, is that it is so flexible. Now within ArcGIS, there are 3 different ways that you can experience ArcGIS Notebooks. You can see it in Pro, which is built into Pro. We'll take a look at that in a little bit. And then you have the hosted notebooks, which are in Enterprise or online. The experiences there are identical. So they're gonna look and feel exactly the same. Really the only difference is that one, you are managing the infrastructure, and the other, Esri, is managing the infrastructure. So how is this different than, let's say, a traditional Jupyter notebook? Well, first, it's built within ArcGIS rather than sitting beside it. If we take notebooks in Pro, for example, you still get Jupyter that ships alongside ArcGIS Pro, but now you have Python notebooks built right in. This means that you don't have to go and look for the Python command prompt to launch your Jupyter notebooks. You don't have to wonder, where do I run this from? And if you're someone that's been dabbling in Python for a little while, or even not so little while, you'll find that very quickly you can create multiple environments and may install Jupyter or Conda multiple times. And so one of the challenges that a lot of people getting started run into is remembering which notebook is in which environment. And so part of the beauty of ArcGIS Notebooks is that ArcGIS manages where those are for you. All you need to know is, where is Pro, where is Enterprise, where's online? And if you can find that, then you can access your notebooks. It also leverages an integrated UI. This allows you to do things like automatically insert Python snippets when you're adding data or analysis tools. And you can quickly access a gallery of samples. We'll take a look at what that looks like in just a little bit. But basically what they're for is to help you either jumpstart analysis or just get started with automation or looking for some lines of code to steal, because that's really a big part of Python scripting, is going and finding somebody who's done something awesome. Let's copy and paste, put that in. Your notebooks are stored as items in your WebGIS. So if you're working in the Enterprise portal or ArcGIS Online, that IPyNB, which is the file extension for a notebook, can now be stored there. And that's whether you created it natively in ArcGIS Notebooks or if you created it in Jupyter and you imported it in. So this allows it to be very flexible and easy for keeping track of your content. You can use ArcPy without Pro. We discussed that a little bit later. Now, Pro is an amazingly powerful spatial data science workstation. If you shouldn't avoid Pro simply to avoid it, but if you do have either the desire to work in a completely cloud-based environment, or you need to be able to access the analytical capabilities that are available within Pro, but can't meet the system requirements, let's say, of having a Windows-only desktop, then this can be an option to where you can expand the analytical capabilities further than you can previously. You can also centrally manage packages and libraries. That Python ecosystem I mentioned earlier is very diverse, and all of the creators of all of those packages do not get together and synchronize, hey, so everyone, let's release tomorrow and let's make sure it all works together. It just doesn't happen. And so what that can mean is that when you're striving towards creating reproducible research, you now not only have to be able to reproduce the research itself, you also have to reproduce their environment. And that can be something that can be very time consuming and a little bit challenging if you are not as familiar with this. So ArcGIS Notebooks takes the guesswork out of that. If you're using ArcGIS Pro, it'll use your Pro environment. If you're in Enterprise or online, we have something called a notebook runtime that basically gathers up all of those libraries, and Esri has managed all the dependencies, so you know that it's going to work when you share it with someone else, and you don't have to worry about any additional setup. So really quickly here, let's take a look. So I'm going to start off in the hosted space, and we're actually here in Notebooks in ArcGIS Online. Now I've had this sitting open, so it might take, oh, it did it really fast this time. I was expecting it to take just a second. I've organized my notebooks with these collapsible cells. These code cells right here, or these markdown cells, allow me to add descriptive text, and then I also have code cells. So when I execute this cell, this one, for example, is getting some data on some customers. It automatically puts it in for me. But say I wanted to go find another data layer, and I wanted to search my organization, and I knew there was a layer on banks. Okay, I can find this layer for bank locations and add it automatically as a Python snippet. I can change the name to something meaningful to me, like bank. And when I run that cell, the data shows up. This will link me into the items details page, so if I needed to learn more about that, I could. Next, let's move on to visualization and exploration. So the first thing we might want to do is look at this data on a map, and we're just going to work with that customer data that I brought in. So let's give that just a second. There they are. And you can see we can click on any feature in this map and we can view it as a pop-up. These map widgets can be stacked side by side, synchronized. You can flip into 2D or 3D. It is up to you. And each one can have different base maps. You can have different stylings. You have all of that flexibility you would expect from ArcGIS. But realistically here, we are not going to want to go through and click on every single one of these points to try to find the information. We'll use something like an open source library such as Pandas to be able to do that. And the ArcGIS API for Python uses the Pandas format to create spatially enabled data frames. And this is significant because what it allows you to do is then use the spatially enabled data frame to explore the data on the map, to visualize the data on the map, and also work with any library that would understand Pandas. So it's now using that baseline Pandas format. And something new that we put in is the ability to go straight from GeoPandas, which is another open source library that things like Sentinel imagery data is provided in ready to use, and goes directly into a spatial data frame. So now you can work and find this FOSS4G open free data, bring it in, work with it without worrying, how am I going to transform this? How am I going to work with it? And then instead of just looking at static maps that you might see, from GeoPandas, you get the rich interactivity of an ArcGIS map. Another really powerful thing about open source is being able to plot your data. So let's say we wanted to understand the distribution of this data by zip code. We can use a library like Seaborn to explore the data. Now, if we were doing an analysis, maybe we would be concerned about this missing zip code here. That tells us there's null records in the data. Now we could go in and explore that more, clean it up. We have samples that show you how to do this. But now maybe I'm ready to perform analysis. So you can see I haven't done this yet. So what we can do when we're performing analysis is just simply click the analysis tab, and you can see all of the standard analysis tools that I would expect to find are right there. So if I wanted to, let's say, find hotspots in this data, I can automatically insert that Python snippet. So it brought in the module from the Python API I needed, and it brings in the snippet. If I wanted to find out what on earth are these parameters that I need, I can replace those parentheses with a question mark, and then it'll show me everything that I need, give me all of the information on is this a required field, is it optional, describe the tool to me, and that's really helpful. So I can see I need an analysis layer, and that's the main thing that I'm going to need here is an analysis layer. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if I hit tab, it'll give me an autocomplete. You can also copy and paste that whole signature that I just showed you and put it in there. So if you're teaching students who don't know Python, that might be a great way to get them started. Just get them to copy paste the whole signature and just go in and start filling it out. So let's see, what did we call that customer data? I think we called it DC customers. Yep. So let's go ahead and put that in. Let's give it an output name so we can just work with it quickly. All right, and we'll let that analysis run really quick and make a new map so we can visualize it here. Well, let's make it M2. We already have M1 will work. When you're building maps in the ArcGIS notebooks, if you give it a location, it uses the built-in geocoding of ArcGIS to be able to center that map on the correct location. All right, we'll let that run a little bit. I expect it to be finished quickly, but since I do want Greg to have his chance, we'll jump into Pro and take a look at what notebooks look like right here. So here I have an ArcGIS Pro project with point clouds, and this actually comes from one of our customers in Australia. Now what you'll see over here in this point cloud are some funky looking lines. And these are actually utility lines. And what this organization does is they need to manage these utility right-of-ways to be able to see if there's any vegetation infringing on it, or just keep track of the quality of the lines. And point clouds help them do it. The challenge is that labeling all of these point clouds, which might look something like this. This is a big point cloud, so it might take it a second to come up. There we go. You can see they've labeled the different posts and lines. So this is what they'll ultimately look like, where the rest of the information is the point cloud, and then you have the features they're interested in. Doing this manually can take tens of thousands of hours, and no customer wants to wait tens of thousands of hours to make sure that they're getting the quality utility service they need. And so what you can do is actually build a deep learning model. And this is still ArcGIS Pro. So if I wanted to dock this notebook to the side, we can see that my map is still here, and I'm able to do things like use the Python API and the ArcGIS.learn module, which holds a lot of deep learning things. To find an ideal learning rate, this will tell us how our model is going to perform. Train the model, we can see, look at the training loss and validity loss, see how well the model is performing. Do a little sampling to compare our ground truth with how the model is predicting. This will tell us, do we need to maybe find more samples or train against additional data? Save that model out so that we can then pass it to data. And here we can see actually how the model performs. So let's not dock this anymore. Let's compare. Get out here, we don't need that anymore. But you can see that the predictions, let's drag these down. There you go. This is a very large point cloud. But you can start to see, while my computer's trying to scroll, that it looks like the model's doing a pretty good job of making predictions as accurately as a human would. Let's go back in online. We can see that analysis is finished, and we can see that output on a map. And another new feature that's coming to online and is already in ArcGIS Enterprise is this ability to schedule notebooks automatically. So this allows you to do scenario-based modeling. It allows you to set notebooks so that you can automatically grab data as it's refreshing from a source. And so you can create these to run multiple times a day. Well, I guess I do need to give it a title. Give it a meaningful title. Don't just hit your keyboard like that. You can set when do you want it to start, how do you want it to repeat, if you want it to end on a day, do you want that to update your notebook itself? All of those are options available to you. And a little later, I'll show you some more ideas of how you can use ArcGIS Notebooks. But in the meantime, I'm going to pass it over to Greg to tell you about how he's used it in his classes.
Thank you, Shannon. So my name is Greg Brunner, and I am here to discuss my experience using ArcGIS Notebooks this past semester while teaching Intro to Programming for GIS and Remote Sensing at St. Louis University. And it's my hope that in showing you how I have used ArcGIS Notebooks, it'll give you some ideas for how to effectively use the new tools and technology, and also motivate you to reimagine your GIS courses in light of new tools and technology. So I've been an adjunct professor at St. Louis University since the spring of 2017, and I was originally asked to migrate the Introduction to Programming for GIS and Remote Sensing course from being IDL programming language based to Python based. So the Introduction to Programming for GIS and Remote Sensing class now uses Python 3 and ArcGIS Pro, and we've been using Jupyter Notebooks for the past semester fully, but even in prior semesters, we were starting to use Jupyter Notebooks. The intro programming course is offered every year. I also teach an advanced programming for GIS and remote sensing course, and that course teaches JavaScript with an emphasis on both Leaflet and the ArcGIS API for JavaScript. And I also introduce advanced topics in Python. So Conda, the ArcGIS API for Python, special packages, and special topics. Now, this course is offered every other year. Now, this past semester, I was teaching the Intro to GIS course. I was using ArcGIS Pro, Python 3, and Jupyter Notebooks. And at St. Louis University, we have a designated lab space for these courses. However, on March 10th during spring break, in-person classes were suspended until March 23rd. At that time, instructors were given the week from March 16th to March 22nd to restructure their course in anticipation of the possibility for going all online. And of course, on March 23rd, the university actually decided, students aren't going to come back from spring break. Let's just push all courses to online. So on March 23rd, all courses went online, and I started teaching a course that I typically get an entire lab space to teach remotely via Zoom meetings. And through this whole transition, my biggest concern was that not every student would have a laptop or PC to run ArcGIS Pro, and that would kind of throw a wrench in how easy it was to get students using Jupyter Notebooks and get students using Pro and understanding these things. So how did I adjust? I adjusted on two fronts. First, I adjusted my curriculum. I decided that I wanted to shift to teaching some more non-GIS related Python packages. Packages like Matplotlib, Pandas, NumPy. I wanted to make sure that, if a student couldn't get ArcGIS Pro up on their laptop or PC, that they could at least get exposed to these other Python packages. I also wanted to focus more towards using ArcGIS Online. Everybody would at least have access to a browser and get to ArcGIS Online in their online accounts. So I wanted to show them how ArcGIS Online worked and how you could use Python to interact with it. Also, I aligned my course content with the Intro to GIS materials. I reached out to the Intro to GIS professor and asked her for her syllabus, and I made sure that topics that I would cover in programming, like geocoding and geoprocessing in ArcGIS Online, were things that she had covered in her Intro to GIS course. I also changed my computer resources, right? I had to adjust to the fact that some students would just be getting set up with ArcGIS Pro and Jupyter on their PCs or laptops. So of course I had to set aside time to set up a meeting with them to make sure that they were running on their laptops with Pro and Jupyter. Also, I had noticed in the last week of March that ArcGIS Notebooks showed up in our ArcGIS Online account. So I decided that I would start using ArcGIS Notebooks, and initially my thought was, hey, just get some lectures in there. But I started using it for lectures, homework solutions, and encouraging students to use it for projects. So on March 30th, actually 10 weeks into the semester, I introduced my students to ArcGIS Notebooks and started using it for my course. And like I said, I kind of eased into it. Students already had Pro set up on their laptops. They were familiar with it, and they were familiar with Jupyter Notebooks. So I initially started just by using it for the first few lectures. I also decided to start sharing the homework solutions and project solutions through it. It's really nice to share these solutions through ArcGIS Notebooks because then students can just run through the solutions and they don't need to worry about downloading a notebook, moving it into a folder, and then running it locally. The third thing I did was I incentivized students to use ArcGIS Notebooks for their projects or for their project. So I basically said, hey, I will give you 5 extra credit points per problem that you do in an ArcGIS notebook. And part of my motivation was that I could iterate with them on their project and kind of track their progress. So with that, let me jump into our St. Louis University ArcGIS Online account and show you a little bit about how I used ArcGIS Notebooks. So here I'm in the St. Louis University ArcGIS Online account. I'm under my content, and I've created a folder called GIS 4090-5090 Notebooks, where I've been storing the lecture notebooks and project and homework solutions since week 10. So, you know, I've listed out, or I've named my notebooks with this format where I say week number followed by the lecture number. So the lecture number is just the sequence in that lecture, followed by the topic of that notebook. So these are the notebooks in my content. I started sharing these notebooks out through groups within ArcGIS Online. So, you know, I only had 6 weeks to work with this for my course, so I only have 2 groups. One where I share out the lecture notebooks, and that also has the homework solutions in it. But a second folder or second group here that shares out final project solutions. So if I jump into the lecture notebooks group, this is what the students see, right? They can go in there and they can see just a long list of the different notebooks that I've been putting in there since about week 10. Now, what does a lecture of mine look like as a notebook? So for that, I'm going to show you 2 examples. The first is going to be an example that I use to teach students how to interact with image services. So this notebook is going to walk through how to extract ocean temperature profiles from a multidimensional image service that's hosted in ArcGIS Online. And I really like to start out my lectures by posing a question, right? How does ocean temperature vary with location, depth, and time of year? And I can structure my notebook to show this notional diagram of what your temperature profiles are going to look like by different latitudes. I can then walk through different steps of how to do this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to connect to that sea temperature image service. And I can do that by basically connecting to ArcGIS Online, defining that image service URL, and connecting to the image service layer. I've defined 4 locations that I want to query the image service so that I can extract temperature profiles at 4 different locations. I then define a symbology and I throw those locations on a map. So these 4 blue dots are going to be the locations that I actually extract ocean temperature profiles for. But before I actually do that, I want to show students that they can extract an image at a specific depth from that image service. So that if a student wants to know what ocean temperature looks like at a depth of 4 meters, they can define a query and say, basically, show me what the temperature looks like globally at 4 meters. I show them that you can do this at 4 meters, 150 meters, 1,250 meters, and then 5,000 meters. And you can see that the temperature is going to vary with depth across the oceans. Now I'm going to kind of skip to the end here, but what I want to get at is how to create these different temperature profiles. And this introduces plotting with matplotlib in Python. And I show them different ways to plot the temperature profiles. Here's a 4x4 grid of subplots where you can see how the temperature profiles vary with time and location. I do a series of 4x1 subplots, not very different from the 4x4. But then I show them that they can actually plot multiple profiles on the same graph and understand that at a specific location, here's how your temperature profiles are going to vary with depth and time of year. Now, this is a standard notebook that I use, but one of the things that I've really liked is that I can turn notebooks into slideshows and give the students a really rich experience for kind of explaining the content. So something that came up in my course is that students were getting confused with all the terminology. They wanted to know the difference between what is a feature set, what is a feature layer, what is a feature collection, and what is a feature layer collection. And I could structure this notebook so that I could turn it into a slideshow that for every question, I can pan across and answer that question, but then I can drill down and show them examples of what, for example, a feature layer collection is. So a feature layer collection is a collection of feature layers and tables with associated relationships. And I can show them that, right, an example of a feature collection or feature layer collection is our tapestry segmentation data set. And why is that? Because it contains 3 layers within it. And then I can show them these maps of what the different layers within that feature layer collection look like. So this is state level tapestry, and then this is going to be zip code level tapestry. So I really like this capability to turn what could just be a regular notebook into a really rich slideshow for the students. Another way I like to use use notebooks is for basically distributing solutions. So this is my final project solutions group for the class. You can see the 4 notebooks that I've shared in it. And one of the things I like to do with notebooks is just using Markdown, list out the problem I want them to solve and assign points to the different questions they're going to answer. So this is what kind of the starter notebook looks like with the questions I want them to answer. Now, I'll show you an example of a student's response. So this student was basically studying demographics over Missouri using the Esri tapestry segmentation. So what she does is she connects to the tapestry segmentation layer. She renders it on a map so that you can see variations in tapestry segmentation as a function of county. But then she dives into doing some nice statistical breakdowns to understand what is the dominant tapestry life mode group, right? And then she finds that cozy country living is the most dominant or the most common, followed by rustic outposts and family landscapes. She can then create a bar chart from this data illustrating it, and then she can make a pie chart from that. She can also dig into what the dominant tapestry segment name is for Missouri counties and see that for that, it's rooted rural, followed by heartland communities, prairie living, and so on. But she also goes on to just play around with different colors she can use for her bar charts and different styles she can use for her pie charts. And finally, she did a little bonus analysis where she wanted to correlate the life mode group with the tapestry segment name and basically found that I believe it's the segments are a subset of the life mode group. So this is an example of how our students actually used it to put together their final project solutions. So I want to start wrapping up by talking about some of the benefits that I've found to using notebooks for my course. So the first is that the notebooks just work, right? Rather than having to have the students change their username or worry about Python package configurations, keeping the notebooks in ArcGIS Online, all of the packages we use are uniform. And when they log into or connect to their GIS, all they have to do is specify GIS equals home here. Another benefit that I found is that sharing notebooks is significantly easier. So at St. Louis University, we use Blackboard for our course content management. And for the past few years, I've been using Blackboard to share Python code and Python notebooks. So on the left, you see a typical week in Blackboard where I've shared the 4 notebooks that I want them to use. Now, what that looks like in ArcGIS Online is similar, right? We see the same notebooks, but for the student to use the notebook in Blackboard, they have to go in, download it, move it to their Python environment, and start up their Python environment. Whereas in ArcGIS Online, all they need to do is click on the notebook and it fires up and they can run through, for example, their project solutions. Another benefit is that I can follow the student's progress. So with notebooks, I can see when the last time they worked on a notebook. I can open up the notebook and see where they are in a homework problem or project problem. And we can iterate with each other. If they want me to look at their notebook, they can just tell me, hey, go to my content and look for the notebook named Final Project Problem 1. So it really lets me or helps me be proactive in working with students and kind of catching where maybe I didn't explain something well enough or maybe students are finding this or that topic more challenging. And then I'd say the last benefit I list here is that it complements WebGIS courses really well. So on the left here, well, what I like to do is I like to juxtapose the way students would do something through a manual workflow versus how you can automate something with code. So what you see here on the left is that I showed students how to aggregate crime points using ArcGIS Online, and we aggregated those points into hex bins. Now I can do that same analysis, but I can automate that using Python, and I've created a notebook where the students can walk through that same ArcGIS Online workflow, but using ArcGIS Notebooks. And I really think that this juxtaposition of the manual workflow versus the Python or automated workflow really helps connect the dots, and it really helps the students understand what's going on. So I want to wrap up by encouraging you to understand ArcGIS Notebooks and in general the new technology and tools that you can use. I really hope this motivates you to understand or ask, right, how can you use technology to improve your courses? Can ArcGIS Notebooks be used to improve how your students learn? I really like the visual aspect of Jupyter and ArcGIS Notebooks and mapping in general. And I think the notebooks really help bring that out. And the last question I would ask is, how do you make your programming courses more approachable? Notebooks in general, I think, do a great job of doing that because it allows you to create a rich experience where you're documenting what you're doing and also showing your work. I also think it's important that in light of changes in technology and new tools that are available, that we reimagine our courses. You know, introduce students to new tools, update your materials, use the free content that is out there on Esri.com, on GitHub. There are tons of sample notebooks out there. And just in general, explore the content that's out there on the internet. There are some awesome blog posts out there that you can turn around and turn into a lecture. For example, I came across this one about cloning ArcGIS content environments and used that as a baseline for explaining content environments and cloning. And so I want to conclude my presentation with this quote from Ben Franklin. Like, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I may learn. Fundamentally, I see new tools like ArcGIS Notebooks as a way to improve how I involve, engage, and immerse my students in programming and mapping. And as educators, I think that if we can use the technology and tools effectively, we can really improve how our students learn programming and really strengthen our students' GIS analytical skills. So with that, I will turn it back over to Shannon.
Thanks, Greg. That was awesome. I want to go take your class now.
Thanks.
All right, if that was not inspiring enough for you, you need more inspiration. I'm going to quickly run through some of what you can do with notebooks. So first, you can integrate open science tools and experiences. So you saw Greg use this and some of his students even using this with things like Pandas, Matplotlib, Seaborn was one of the ones I showed. There's lots of options out there. And then you combine that with the ArcGIS spatial analysis tools, all of the data that's in the Living Atlas, publicly shared data from ArcGIS Online, and you can put all of that into your notebooks. You can also work with a really wide range of data, whether you're wanting to analyze imagery, multidimensional data, space-time data, unstructured data. That could be text files, that could be, it can be scanned images. There's some really great work being done where you can take images that's currently captured in books and transform those into geo-referenced, ready-to-use features that can be used for action. Then there's the ArcGIS.Learn module, which is the deep learning and machine learning module of the Python API. So you saw a little bit of that with the point clouds, but you can do a lot more with that. So you can explore AI, machine learning, deep learning. Here's some examples of, kind of some traditional workflows, things like object detection, classification, feature extraction, but it doesn't stop there. You can analyze documents and extract features from them for natural language processing. You can classify data in 3D point clouds and be able to extract the 3D objects from those. You can work with full motion videos. You can work with taking those models that you build and take them to the edge, meaning that you build a model that, let's say, classifies plant species. And all of a sudden you can engage a community of citizen scientists that are able to go and help collect data that can be used for research studies, that can be used to get a lot more work out there, and just body of data that then when you bring it back into ArcGIS, you can look and see, is this representative? Where do I need to maybe get additional data? Is this going to be a biased model that I'm creating? And then there's even more than that. We talked about automating the analyses and data pulls, especially around COVID-19. This has been extremely popular. Those feeds get updated and people want to be able to pull them in and be able to not only have the data be updated, but automatically have that entire workflow be re-executed once that data pulls. And you can do that. You can share the notebooks as reproducible research or as lessons like Greg showed. You can perform all different kinds of analysis, everything from suitability modeling to prediction, pattern detection, time series forecasting. And the beautiful thing is that you're not limited to a domain. You're not stuck in just, well, this is only for environmental problems. No, Jupyter is being used by data scientists in almost every industry, in almost every segment, and they're doing it from everything from marketing to business analysis to being able to help innovate and create new products for their organizations. You can use notebooks to manage your online organization. So if you have a new class of students come in, you can just simply clear out everyone else's. Your students can use it to help them move content. So they're moving on, but they don't have to leave their work behind. They can use this to move it over into their own ArcGIS online organization, or to even just do an automatic dump of all their Python files they created so they have that work with them. And like I said, with AI to the edge, you can, as the studies designer or researcher, create models that can be pushed out to mobile devices that make it easy for people who aren't experts in any given domain to be able to collect data as if they were. And that's what I had. I'm going to turn it back over to Rena now to elaborate a little bit more.
Thank you, Shannon. And thank you, Gregory. That was inspiring, really. So we're gonna talk a little briefly here about the licensing, access, and resources. All right, so is everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so the good news is ArcGIS notebook licenses are included in higher education institutional agreement. So any universities that have agreement with Esri, you have already access to ArcGIS notebooks. So how you enable it? In ArcGIS Pro, no additional license is needed. It's part of the core product. And in ArcGIS Online, you just need to enable a couple privileges to work with ArcGIS Notebook. So I'm going to show you how to do that. And in ArcGIS Enterprise, the ArcGIS Notebook is part of the server role, and it's available with ArcGIS Enterprise 10.7 or later. And to use that, you also require to have the Docker images, which you also can download from my Esri. So let's take a look in the detail here. So in ArcGIS Pro, you can simply go to the ribbon, and under the Insert tab, you can click and open a new notebook. Or in the catalog window, you can just right-click to any of the folder, make a new notebook, and as simple as that. In ArcGIS Online, again, there is a access setup need to be done by administrator. So administrator need to create a custom role, or if you already have a custom role that you use for your student, just edit that existing custom role. And in that custom roles, then enable under the content category, enable, create, and edit notebooks. Now, this is going to give the privilege grant to ability to create and edit interactive notebook documents. Then basically, this is the basic access to the notebook. Under the premium content, you can enable advanced notebooks. By enabling advanced notebook, then this is give privilege grant the ability to import and use ArcPy models, and also access to the higher GPU, which is access to GPU-enabled runtimes. Once you set it up, then save that changes and assign that custom role as the default role in your new user defaults. So any new member to your organization, we automatically get that access to ArcGIS Notebooks. If this is a new custom role, you may want to apply it to the existing users. So you can just select all your existing user and then click manage the user role and change the user role to custom role at once. We have a lot of resources available to get started with ArcGIS Notebook. You will receive a follow-up email with these resources. So we're gonna list that in that email. And we know that many of you are waiting for the new Python book. So good news is Esri Press is about to release new books on Python, Python scripting for ArcGIS Pro, and advanced Python scripting for ArcGIS Pro. Both book, the ebook and print, will be available this coming July. And don't forget that faculty member, you can get the sampling copy for free from the vitalsource.com. And we have a lot of lessons and training available. So visit our ArcGIS Learn lesson and Esri training as well to get access to Python and ArcGIS notebook lessons. And last thing, any of you that like to take the MOOC, we have the spatial data science that upcoming in October. The registration is open, and this is featured a lot of ArcGIS notebook in there. All right, before we move to the QA session, we would like to again ask your participation on the poll question. So we're gonna open the first poll. Here, after you hear from Gregory, Shannon's, we are wondering if you are interested in integrating ArcGIS Notebook in your course or curriculum. So we probably give like 15 seconds for this. All right, and then the second poll is our team, the higher education outreach teams, is really happy to work with any of you. And if you like to get assistance from us in integrating ArcGIS Notebook in your course or curriculums. So we've been helping several of the higher education's community, somebody like Gregory, the teaching class, and we love to help any of you that want to integrate this maybe in your fall semester or the next year.
So unfortunately, it seems like the polls are not working for some people.
Oh. Okay.
But shall we move to the Q&A?
Okay, sure. So in the Q&A in here, we also give the email list, and please contact the higher ed at esri.com if you like to contact us and work together for integrating ArcGIS Notebook. All right, the QA session, we're gonna invite my colleague Angela Lee to facilitate, please.
Yeah, so we've gotten several great questions. Let's start out with some questions about collaboration. So does ArcGIS Notebooks facilitate collaboration in either ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS Online? So can students share their maps, share code, edit one another's notebooks? So can somebody speak to the possibilities of collaboration?
Yeah, I can. So when it comes to sharing your notebooks, you can share your IPyMB files. If you're in online or enterprise, that's just sharing it as an item. If you're working in Pro, those notebooks are shared they are saved with your Pro project. So you can simply share your Pro project. or you can decide where specifically that notebook will be saved. So you can decide to put it on a shared drive or anything like that, where others would have access to that notebook as well and be able to incorporate it into their pro projects. When it comes to something like distributed collaboration, that's something we have on our roadmap. It's something that we're actively exploring. How do we get the code and all of the dependencies and all of the right runtimes all lined up all across the platform? But that's something that we expect in the future.
Great. And related question, if you have a custom geoprocessing tool that is part of your enterprise environment, could that be made available to other users using notebooks?
You don't have to. You don't have to use a notebook. You could share those as web tools. If you wanted to incorporate them into a notebook, you could. There's a couple different ways you can do that. You can create a Python file from it. You can just access your geoprocessing service. New in Pro 2.6 coming up, you can even overwrite those custom analytics to Enterprise from Pro, so that's pretty cool too. But yes, that should be something that you are able to do.
Great. So it is possible to move from a geoprocessing tool to a notebook, or take a existing Python script and bring that into a notebook. So there's possibilities to transfer. Okay, fantastic. A question about bringing in data from other sites. So somebody wants to be able to analyze and model fire events using data from NASA. Can they pull data from a NASA website into a notebook to analyze it? And if so, are there code samples or any examples to help somebody understand that process?
Yes, we have an example. It's in the Python API guide, but you can use it in ArcGIS Notebooks. And it's showing, actually, we have it in our notebook sample gallery too. It's not showing an example from NASA specifically, but it's showing USGS and pulling data from them. But it's the same workflow. The thing that you're going to want to keep in mind is just what is the size of the data coming across. If people are having issues with bandwidth, that could be something to consider. And then any security on that data itself. So notebooks will not violate any security that you have in place. So if you would not ordinarily be able to access data, notebooks does not allow you to magically access data that you wouldn't have had. Now with NASA, they're making it publicly available. So there's ways to do that. From Dev Summit 2020, there's also a video of how you can pull data from multiple sources. We use some e-scooter data from DC and some events, and how you can use that in a notebook. And there's a blog on that as well. So there's samples, there's blogs, there's videos, there's all sorts of resources to help you.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit about interoperability with Jupyter? So can an ArcGIS notebook be opened from within Jupyter, and vice versa? Could straight up Jupyter notebook be opened within, say, ArcGIS Pro?
Yes, you can absolutely do that. Importing ArcPy and B files is absolutely fine. Now, what you're going to want to do, if you're going from ArcGIS Notebooks to open source Jupyter, you're going to want to change that connection string. Remember, Greg showed you all you do is GIS equals GIS home. You're going to want to change that to entering credentials. We encourage you not to enter your credentials in plain text. The Python API has many examples of how you can have your authentication where it is not exposing it in clear text. But you'll want to do that. The other thing you'll want to do is look at the manifest of the notebook runtime if you're going from enterprise or online. If you're working from notebooks in Pro and wanting to go to open source Jupyter, look at your Pro Python environment. And then just make sure that those libraries that you're expecting to have in your separate Jupyter notebook exist. They likely will. It will likely work just fine. The one exception being if you're moving to an environment where you are in open source Jupyter and you're wanting to access ArcPy, you're going to need to still have a Pro license you can connect to if you've left the ArcGIS Notebooks ecosystem. Now, if you want to go the other way and you want to go from an ArcPy and B file open source Jupyter into ArcGIS Notebooks, You're going to want to still check the manifest, make sure that there aren't any libraries that or dependencies that you're expecting that don't exist in that notebook runtime. We include over 300 open source libraries, and so the odds are it's already there. If it is not, you can do a pip or conda install to get the libraries that you need into the system. If you're working with Enterprise or Pro, you can actually just add those on a more permanent basis, so you don't have to keep doing a pip or conda install. Then the other thing you'll want to do is change that connection string from whatever you have it right now where you're manually entering credentials to connect to your WebGIS to using the GIS equals GIS home, because what that's going to do is make it easy for you to share in that notebooks environment, and it will automatically apply any of the security privileges that you have as that user. So we highly recommend that, because otherwise you're just sharing a notebook with your credentials in it. So if you shared it to someone else, they then have your credentials. So that's why we strongly encourage use GIS equals GIS home there.
Got it. Thank you. All right. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Just as a reminder, yes, this session has been recorded, and you should receive a follow-up email within the next few days with the link to the recording and some additional information. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Rena.
Yes, thank you, Angie. Again, so please.
I think we might have lost Rena's audio.
Okay.
But
All right, sorry. Yes,
thank you.
Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you to Shannon and Gregory for participating and presenting. Again, we're gonna send the link to the recording, and please contact us if you like to work with us and we can assist you. Thank you.